All right, I'll wait about 30 seconds so we can get started. We got everybody here. All right, good evening, everybody. Good evening, it's 5:02. I am Humberto Gurmilan, the president of the governing board, and we'll call this special board meeting of the San Isidro School District to order at 5:02. I would like to ask that all members of the board please mute your devices and everybody else also in attendance. Trustees of San Isidro School District Board and the public shall participate in this meeting via teleconference. The public may view the open session part of this meeting by accessing the YouTube link provided on tonight's agenda. To listen to this meeting in Spanish, please call 1-622-443-2557 and enter the access code 753-665-600 #. Si usted desea escuchar esta junta en español, marque al 1, área 662-443-2559. Y por favor ingrese el número 753-665-600 y el signo de gato. Members of the public are welcome to record this meeting using their own personal devices. Prior to roll call, I would like to make clear and for the record that this meeting, and it should be reflected in the minutes of this meeting, that this governing board meeting is conducted pursuant to Governor Newsom's Executive Order N-29-20. That moves us on to item number 2, which is a roll call, and I'll ask our superintendent, Dr. Gina Potter, to please help us with the roll call.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening, everyone. Beginning with agenda item number 2, roll call, Mrs. Rosalia Palasigue.
Present.
And board member, Mrs. Irene Lopez.
Present.
And board clerk, Mr. Rudy Lopez.
Here.
Board Vice President, Mr. Antonio Martinez.
Present.
And Board President, Mr. Gurmilan.
Present.
Mr. President, all 5 board members are here.
Thank you, Dr. Potter. I would now like to request that each board member please respond to the following questions. I'll start with Trustee Palasigue. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And were you able to hear our proceedings on this end until now?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of tonight's agenda?
Yes.
Good evening. Now moving on to Trustee Ms. Irene Lopez. Do you hear me well?
Yes.
Were you able to hear our proceedings up to this point?
Yes.
And do you have a copy of tonight's agenda?
Yes, I do.
Thank you, Ms. Irene. Mr. Lopez, do you hear me well?
I can.
Were you able to hear our proceedings up to this point?
I could.
Excellent. And do you have a copy of tonight's agenda?
I do.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Martinez, can you hear me well?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. And were you able to hear our proceedings up to this point?
Yes.
Awesome. And do you have a copy of tonight's agenda?
Yes.
Excellent. Perfect score up to this point. Great job, everybody. That moves us on to item number 3, which is our flag salute. And I'm going to ask everybody to please mute your microphones while I lead us for our flag salute. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everybody. We're now on item number 4, which is approval of tonight's agenda. I will now ask for a motion to approve this agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Antonio Martinez moves, for the record, and Ms. Palasigue seconds. Any changes? Thank you. Dr. Potter, could you call a roll call vote for us to approve tonight's agenda?
Calling for the roll call vote for agenda item number 4, which is the approval of the agenda, beginning with board member Mrs. Rosalia Palasigue.
Yes.
Board member Mrs. Irene Lopez.
Yes.
Board member Board clerk, Mr. Rudy Lopez.
Aye.
Board Vice President, Mr. Antonio Martinez.
Yes.
And Board President, Mr. Humberto Gurmilan.
Yes.
The vote passes 5-0.
Thank you, Dr. Potter. And now we move on to public comment, communications on open and closed session items. Persons who wish to comment on topics included on open session agenda items or items not on the agenda or topics included in the closed session agenda. We're also invited to submit comments via email to the following email address: publiccomment@sysdschools.org. On or before 3 p.m. today. Comments were limited to 300 words or less. All comments submitted regarding open session and closed session items will be read aloud at this time. Please note that all email correspondence related to this meeting will become part of the board minutes. I will now ask our public relations coordinator, Mr. Francisco Mata, to see if there are any public comments for open or closed session items. Mr. Mata, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. President. Good evening, Governing Board, Superintendent, Cabinet, and guests. At this time, we do not have any public comments for open or closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Mata. We will now move on to general administration and begin the board governance workshop. And item number 6, that's precisely that. Item is general administration, and 6.1 is our board governance workshop. This board governance workshop will focus on the topics of COVID, school safety, school reopening instruction phases, and COVID recession and declining enrollment budget reduction planning for fiscal year 2021 and 2022. And I'll go ahead. I don't have a speaker. Oh.
Good evening, members of the board. We this evening are focused on a few of the very important key topics related to most school districts in the state of California at this time. One is, how are we addressing the COVID-related topics for our schools and for safety? And the second is budget, as it primarily relates to two topics: the COVID recession and also declining enrollment. We do have 5 brief presentations to cover each of these topics, crossing most of our departments. And the first one begins with 6.1A, which is a review of a board policy that our governing board has approved at the last board meeting. We just want to make sure that the components of that board policy are known district-wide in the public venue of a board meeting. So we have Dr. David Farkas to present Board Policy 0470, COVID-19 Mitigation Plan. And again, just trying to make sure that we are all moving in the same direction with COVID safety.
Good evening, Governing Board. Good evening, everyone. Although the presentations tonight, there's multiple presentations and they are all very serious and heavy in content. We're also very thankful that they tie together very well. So I'm starting as an overview of our board policy 0470, which is our COVID-19 mitigation plan. The mitigation plan overview on the next slide explains some of our actions that we are going to be taking during this presentation and throughout the opening and the planned opening of our district. This policy supersedes the existing district policies and administrative regulations, and also speaks to the board's decision to reopen with consultation of the team. The district evaluates our capacity, and we'll be speaking about that tonight, not only in this presentation, but in future presentations here on how we implement our safety measures and our capacity at our schools for our students and our staff. And then finally, to provide the information ongoing as we prepare for our safe return. Although we've made strides, we know things change, so we want to make sure that we're continuing to inform the board and the stakeholders. And then our next slide. This slide speaks to the students and how we're supporting our students through this very challenging time. The portion of the day is designated not only for academics, but also our social emotional well-being of our students. So there's a structure inside our days and our weeks to help our students throughout their social emotional piece of this pandemic. It also gives us an opportunity to provide assistance and referrals through social services, through student study teams, and through attendance checks to make sure our students are connected and okay at home. There's also a piece where we open up our school year every school year where we speak to staff about mandated reporting, but it's no different during our distance learning. So we've continued to make sure that we still are responsible for our mandating reporting piece to keep our students safe. Closures, as we went through last spring, we know that the closures could bring an opportunity or an unfortunate opportunity sometimes when it comes to having to adjust grading accordingly. So the board, through the policy, could adjust alternative grading, increase the final grade opportunities, and then also what we've seen in the recent past is the pass or fail opportunities. So that's all that's many of what we're doing with the students, and we continue to find different resources and find different ways to connect to our students while they are at home with anticipation of getting them back as soon as safely possible. Next slide. The next slide is instructional schedules. And it is currently the plan for the district to move towards blended learning when we are safe and ready when it comes to the county. The purple and the red tiers we'll be speaking of in a few minutes. We've been planning for blended learning, and the blended model allows for our students to be on campus for portions of the week and still working online for the other portions of the week. So we're working on that, and we've had a real team effort to organize that over the course of the summer and fall. We also are arranging our classrooms, and Mr. Acevedo will be speaking to that presentation and how our classrooms look when it comes to arranging our learning areas for our students, much differently than our traditional setting, but also 6 feet apart and very protected for our students and our staff. And then considering our essential workers and our students that need help and families that need help, we've opened up 4 sites for, and you'll hear about that tonight as well, with our YMCA staffing to better accommodate and support our students. Teachers have done a fantastic job. Classified has done a fantastic job. The district support has been fantastic when it comes to how do we build on new platforms, new resources, and collaborate with each other to harness our instructional strategies that are purposeful and helpful to our students and to our staff. We still have work to do, but we're excited about the collaboration in this respect. And then finally, one of the things we've been focusing on when it comes to instruction is our synchronous learning. That's direct work with our students, direct instruction with our students, and how we can better engage our students. And again, we're very thankful and proud that we're working together to keep that moving forward. Next slide. That is our attendance and screening. Our sites are now equipped with temperature. They're pretty impressive, actually. They look like metal detectors at an airport where you walk through. The students can walk through and you get an instant temperature check. So it's very efficient and very accurate at our sites. We continue to screen for symptoms, and we will continue to screen for symptoms through various formats to make sure people entering campus, whether it's students or staff, are asymptomatic, and we can make sure that they are safe to come onto campus before they enter campus. Our distance learning piece when it comes to on-campus instruction versus off-campus instruction. If we ever have a situation that we need to move a student off campus, that student still would have an education through the distance learning piece until they could return safely to campus. And then another layer of this preventative response is, how are we going to make sure when our students come back to campus, are they cleared? So that's a medical provider piece to make sure that they are safe to come back on campus. Students will continue to connect with their staff, whether it's our outreach consultants, our administrators, or our teachers, to make sure that we are finding them online. And if someone is not showing up online for distance learning, we make sure that we respond quickly and effectively to find out why, if it's a hotspot issue where they can't access technology, or if they're disconnected in any way. We try to respond as fast as possible to make sure our students aren't missing instruction and they're safe. And then finally, if a student does come on campus that doesn't feel well when we open up for blended learning, we have a very safe and private plan for isolation so that that student is comfortable until we can accommodate them and get them home safely if they don't feel well. Next slide. The next slide's lengthy. I won't speak to every bullet, but it's our social distancing, as we've heard many times, PPE and hygiene. I'm really proud of our district and our teamwork together to make sure we have all of these pieces in place, which includes how are we ensuring we have enough PPE? How do we ensure that they are trained for PPE? We are have already had staff viewing videos. The San Ysidro School District staff has been fantastic of making sure they wear their masks on campus before they even, as they get out of their vehicle. And we have some teachers and some classified staff on campus. Fantastic job. So we're very proud of how everyone's taking it seriously. And that's going to also be a great model for our students. They will also learn through videos, and we've already seen them understanding the seriousness of wearing a mask, along with shielding. You'll hear from Mr. Acevedo in a little while on how we shield our desk with plexiglass, not only for our staff, but our students, and face shields as well for those that get close to the students. And then obviously we're talking about washing hands often, hand sanitizers available. So we're very, I think we're very close to being ready for any students on campus. So I'm very proud of our district and the sanitation and disinfecting that we have. Next slide is the follow-up, contact tracing and closures. This is quite a detailed commitment, but I want to thank everyone for working together. Our staff has been fantastic in following our district guidelines of asking our staff every other month to test and then to share not necessarily the results, but the proof of testing. And it's just been a fantastic job. Everybody's taking it seriously and getting tested, and it's really helped in our safety measures. And then anytime we do have a positive case, which we've had a handful, the county officials are contacted. We walk through it. Employee privacy and individual privacy is always maintained. And anyone that's exposed to a positive case, potentially we play it very safe and we make sure they quarantine for the 14-day period. And I'd say every single time the quarantine period proves to not have a transmission. So I'm again thankful that we're wearing our masks, social distancing, and we haven't had one case that we are sure of that has been transmitted on our campuses. Usually something has happened outside of campus and it's come onto campus, and everyone's protected. So I'm very thankful for that, and so is our district.
So our contact tracing, Dr. Farkas, we're doing our own form of contact tracing, right?
Ms. Palisiga, we are the first layer because of the incredible communication and teamwork of all of our staff at San Ysidro School District. So we always hear it before the county informs us, and then we contact the county. They follow up with even more detail to communicate as partners. But we're usually, I boast this, I guess I'm boasting this, that we're about 24, 48 hours before our county even gets
Wow.
we inform the county usually, which, that's just a kudos to the staff and the community of San Ysidro, because the county's been fantastic to work with and advise. The epidemiology department's been fantastic as well. So, and it's really about taking care of each other, really, when someone doesn't feel well and they say I was around someone else, and it really helps. But obviously we protect privacy as well. And then, and we also send out anytime there's a potential area that might have exposure. We have a special, you've probably heard of this already, but we have the special Clorox 360 disinfectant that sanitizes that area through the air. And it's just been a quick response by our maintenance team and our custodial team and Mr. Acevedo's team. And then finally, the contact tracing and the decision sometimes when you get into students and staff on campus, including our YMCA program, it's based on cohort, and we'll talk a little bit more about cohort, and we'll continue to talk about cohorts because that's part of blended learning. You have a certain group of students that has to stay together for safety so that you can contain those students while they learn and while they're on campuses. And what we do then is we follow the guidelines on if someone was to be infected in a cohort, that cohort would close and we wouldn't have to close our entire school. And that's kind of the, as you all know, that's the plan when it comes to cohorts. That
I
extra.
like the design of this, the cellular plan of having mini cohorts to manage. That way the containment it's easier containment. I really like that. That's pretty cutting edge. And thank you to CSEA. I mean, I'm SYE, everybody, but CSEA, you know, they're the ones really having to carry out all of these specific instructions and implement training at a rather fast pace. So it's amazing how unified both of our unions are, of course, you know, but CSEA really hats off, because it's a scary thing, you know, to have to implement and carry out. So it's a big tackle, but I'm in awe. It's amazing.
It's a challenging and stressful time for everyone. And sometimes you don't see perfectly eye to eye, but everyone realizes that the most important thing is safety and communication. And I'm really proud of all of our units to work together.
Dr.
Len-
Marcus, I had a question
Yes.
regarding the staff tested every other month. Your department will be taking care of that. Is it you?
Yes, ma'am. It's I asked the staff, regardless of their position, to send me a receipt of their test. And then almost every time, thank goodness, it comes back negative. But even if it doesn't come back negative, it's also a preventative measure as well. If someone surprisingly tests positive and had no symptoms, it's just a way to get them home safely and quickly instead of having them on campus asymptomatic. So I document every test through our district as it comes in. And we have it on a schedule, so everyone's not testing at the exact same week. So that's why it's every other month.
Dr. Farkas, just quick question following up on that, because I had a question about testing. I know we're doing it every month. Is this according to recommendations from the state, from the county, or are we doing it ourselves? I don't mean to be too invasive with everybody, because I think everybody is doing already a lot by testing, but it seems like every other month, maybe for some individuals that are more essential, might be, you know, a long time. A lot of things can happen during a month. I'm just curious about, you know, how we are coordinating that. But it seems like if everybody's staggered, then it's doing a great job.
Yes, it's something we can accomplish, and it's from the California Department of Public Health. We are following guidelines, and we're also taking more of the conservative approach when it comes to safety. We're making sure that our staff is tested on the guidelines instead of maybe being a little bit more lenient on it. So it's every other month, and we started with the people that are on the campuses first. When it came to our YMCA employees that we're working with together as a partnership. And then also even our teachers that are going into classrooms to teach from their room, they've done a fantastic job. And then obviously our classified staff that has been organizing and preparing for reopening every day, they've been doing a great job of testing as well. And our managers.
And I'll add, yes, the board members are testing too. Thank you. I'll add to that while the California Public Health Department's guidance for public schools in the state of California is every other month for staff, and we're adhering to those guidelines, we're thankful to the San Diego County Health and Human Services. They're the ones that are funding the testing for all of the school districts in the county of San Diego. And they've also opened up at this point over 40 free county health department COVID testing locations. And anybody that's 12 years old or older can go at any time. So even though it's every other month, if you're experiencing symptoms, you can go to those testing locations. You self-refer yourself to those testing locations. So we're very fortunate in this county. Out of over 50 counties in the state of California, from what I've heard, we're probably one of the only counties health departments that have funding millions of dollars to allow the schools, the public schools, to do the testing and to also test more frequently if they feel like if they have individuals with symptoms. So very fortunate.
Thank you, Dr.
I
Potter.
also asked Dr. Farkas, when you do this testing and it's on record, I know you have to let the Department of Ed, well, I think that county office, but also city, so they know also the people that have been tested and what if they're negative or positive. So when it comes to the month, that's what I'm kind of thinking. You know, everybody's in a rush, everybody's been pressured. Is there something that's going to go out and remind them that on this date you have to have the test done again? It's going to be a month.
Yes, ma'am. We have a schedule that's a rotational schedule. So we send not only the reminders for the beginning of the week of what positions are going to be tested, but that'll be a cyclical effect. After 8 weeks, we'll start it again.
Yeah, I'll add on Monday, every Monday morning, Dr. Farkas sends out an email message letting the group know which group goes for testing that week. So you've got the whole schedule for about 2 months in a row, which staff group goes each week. And then he sends out a monthly email letting them know which group goes that week. And then when you go to the testing, because we're going to a county health department location for the COVID testing, when you arrive, they have you use your cell phone and you scan an app. It's the San Diego County Health Department app. And that app, you let them know kind of what email address you want your testing results sent to, and that's their database. And so it's the county health department's database. And again, it's all protected. So an individual can choose to have that information when it's emailed to them, emailed as an encrypted message or not. It's personal individual's choice.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Potter referred to multiple testing sites and the county's incredible response to testing as well, the SDCOE's response as far as funding. Many of our staff have used the school personnel site in Chula Vista, and our response time to get back results is usually 2 days. So we're very efficient. It's helping a lot.
Yeah, and those testing locations, the school personnel testing locations are at the bottom of the district highlights that we publish every week. And we are also publishing the non-school personnel only testing locations that are by the county health department. And anybody can go. It doesn't just have to be school personnel. Anybody can go. The rule is they just have to be 12 years old or older.
That was another question because I noticed that at the County Office of Education on their updated on the COVID, an employee was asking if their children could go get tested. And they said that they didn't think so. It had to be an employee only, not their family. But is ours also included?
At the,
No, huh?
At the school only locations, like the one in Chula Vista on L Street, that's just school employees. You have to bring your ID badge, but there's 42 free San Diego County Health COVID testing locations. And those are on the bottom of the highlights newsletter as well that goes out every week. And those ones, they can go there. They don't have to go to the school only one. So they can go to any of them as long as they're sponsored by the San Diego Health Department. So there's 2 right here in San Ysidro that are non-school personnel for anybody. You could bring your child as long as they're 12 and older, bring your whole family. There's one in Imperial Beach right now that's close here to our region. And there's a couple in Chula Vista. So yes, they can bring, they don't have to, our staff doesn't have to go to the personnel only locations. They just have to go to one on the list in the highlights. That's from the San Diego Health Department. And then they'll give them verification of testing. And that's what we take a picture of an email to Dr. Farkas.
Okay, thank you.
And my son's coming home on Saturday from the University of Arizona, and before he even asks for pizza or wings, we're going to go to one of those sites to make sure he can see it, sit inside our living room. So. And then our final slide tonight for my presentation is this one is an interesting one, and it's something that we've looked into great detail lately as we entered the purple tier. You can see that it says blended model and specialized cohorts, phase 3. This is all part of phase 3 when it comes to how are we going to be bringing back our students to our campuses safely. Well, under the red tier, as we know, we could bring them back as planned in January with that blended model where a student can come to school on Monday and Wednesday for in-person learning, and then the rest of the week work online, and then vice versa for cohort B. And then our classrooms are set up so that 6 feet apart. So we only have about 12 students in each classroom. And then that's for the students and families that choose to be blended, to be in the blended learning model. They could also choose to stay with what they're doing now with the distance learning. And that comes, as you'll know soon from Ms. Gonzalez in HR in her presentation, it comes with staffing challenges. And then there's another layer of this model where it's called specialized cohorts, and that's the purple tier where we are right now. Under the purple tier, a district may open with specialized cohorts, but that's again even more limited on how many students are allowed on campus. That is only up to 25% of a total campus enrollment. And those students also could be about up to 14 students in a classroom, and it focuses on those students that are in need of support, whether it comes to academic support or any kind of support when it comes to socio-emotional or family support. So that's why we put as our at-risk learners, obviously our students with disabilities that might be falling behind or need extra support on campus, our English learners, our foster youth, our students that maybe are having trouble accessing anything, whether it's shelter or connectivity with our platforms, and then also any socially disadvantaged students that might need extra support as well that are falling behind. And that
Can I ask Dr. Farkas, I'm sorry to interrupt, but with regard to the students that are, this may be a question more for Ms. Gonzalez, but are we seeing a lot of students fall off the grid as far as, just truancy, not showing up, and, or any of them that have tested positive for COVID, just wondering what our numbers are in those two regards.
We're actually fairly proud of our attendance right now because of all the efforts from our school sites to make sure our students are in those virtual classrooms and the effort it takes to connect with them. And there's some real heroes out there that are making sure our students are contacted if they are falling off when it comes to online logins. But there is also the piece that we're really concerned about with those academic achievement gaps, situations where students might not be getting enough when it comes to breakfast or lunch. And then again, when we're talking about English learners, and we know we have more than a few in our district here, we need to make sure that they have that in-person learning if possible so they don't fall behind on their development. And then special education is a whole nother challenge because there's commitment that it comes with instructional aids, small group learning, and everything that goes with the students' individualized education plan. So those are kind of what we're looking at, all that achievement gap, and then also the support that comes with our specific subgroups.
And generally, at this point, we're very proud of our students and our teachers because our average is 95% of our students are logging into school every single day. We also want to thank our principals because they now have a running list of students in the 5% that aren't logging in. Those students, by California's definition, are considered chronically absent. And those principals are working with their staffs and with the district office to reconnect and re-engage with those families and those students and to create a plan of action to help them have more positive attendance. In fact, a couple of the principals have even, the recommendation for a few of those students is to make them a priority in having access to our during the day in-person YMCA program. Some of those students that are chronically absent are now coming to school in the YMCA program. So, but again, big claps, 95% of our children every single day are logging in, and that's the district-wide average. If you think about it, from March to June last year, there were districts up and down the state where maybe 50% of the students were logging in.
Well, first of all, Dr. Potter, I just want to congratulate you and your team for getting that number so high. That's fantastic. In terms of the 5%, are those individuals, are those students, I guess the question would be, why are they chronically absent? Are they chronically absent as if, so some of them would be chronically absent if we would be, going to campus as opposed to the, distance learning. So are those students consistently chronically absent independent of distance learning, or has distance learning played a role to making those students chronically absent? And I guess if it's the latter, then my hope is that we have a game plan to deal with that. Given some of the students have been transitionally homeless, for example, having difficulty, having access to the internet or even a safe learning space. So I guess that's my question. If that group, that 5%, are individuals that would be chronically absent, even if we weren't going through a pandemic.
The simple answer is both situations and scenarios are playing out right now for our students. Some of it is that the unemployment rate in San Ysidro right now is the highest it's ever been, and one of the highest unemployment rates in the state of California. Statewide, about 25% of the population in the state is experiencing unemployment. However, in San Ysidro, it's 1 in 3. So we're at about 30%. Several of our businesses have closed here in San Ysidro, so that sudden unemployment is causing an unexpected spike in homelessness and rates of homelessness, or transitional homelessness is probably better captures most of our students because they are finding temporary housing for the most part. And thanks to the leaders within our community, such as our board member, Mrs. Irene Lopez, when we do see a family that appears to have lost a home and they're living in one of our parks or a vehicle, we're trying to secure immediate support for them. And a special thanks to Mrs. Lopez. She has been able to secure and help with temporary shelter support for some of our families in our town. So I think that's part of it. Indeed, there's some students, whether they came to school or learning online, that chronic absenteeism continues to be a factor. And our management team, and a big thanks to Educational Services, Cynthia Gonzalez and Mr. Calleros, created a multi-tiered system of re-engagement for students that are falling into the chronic absenteeism category. I think, sometimes if the children know we care about them and they have the ability to log on, then they log on. And that's how you get to that 95%, because our community deeply cares about our children.
Do you have an idea? I'm looking at the specialized cohort. If we were to go into remain on the purple tier, hope to God, no. But I'm thinking the 25%, you say it could be up to 14 students. Do we know or have a list of how many total we will have if we're able to open up and do it this way? I mean, do we have an idea?
Mm-hmm. Statewide, if a county is in the purple tier, you are allowed to do two things. You're allowed to do specialized cohorts. You're also allowed to submit a waiver for the elementary schools to open. Mm-hmm. For our district, our proposal is to focus more on the specialized cohort option so that we can really narrow down to the list of children that that probably can't wait past January to come to school. And so those children, we know, what I'd like to do is we're planning to do a collaborative meeting with our labor union partner leaders and also with some of our administrators to really sit down and hone in. If we had to create a tiered list of which children we would prioritize, what would that priority list be? Yeah, I hesitate to give my own opinion because I'd really like for us to reach that point collaboratively. If you were to ask me, of course, the first priority would be children who don't have a home. They're living in the parks, they're living in their cars. Their safe place is our schools. So if you asked me, my opinion would be that that's your first priority of children that we would offer back to come to school in a specialized cohort. That second tier likely are your children who are really struggling mightily in school. They tend to be our children in our most restrictive special education classes. Learning online tends to be very, very difficult for them. And that's what the data is showing us statewide. It's not just our district. And then, looking at maybe our students where we just finished or we're in the middle of the report card period. So which are the students that, are struggling on that report card and had a first quarter or first semester with some F grades or some ones. So the ones would be at your elementary schools and the F grades would be at your middle schools. So really using data to choose which students would have this opportunity of a specialized cohort. But again, it takes the team. So we really want to have this collaborative meeting first. We haven't had an opportunity to have it yet because we just found out last week the whole county defaulted to the purple tier. So now we're vetting what our options are. And as you know, it's like putting together a 1,000-piece puzzle right now. And the puzzle keeps changing on us. So the more we work together collaboratively with all the key stakeholders as we make changes, the better for our students.
Thank you. Good. Yes.
Dr. Farkas, did you have one last slide?
Nope, the next slide is for I'm sorry, you're correct, Dr. Potter. The top link is our board policy we spoke about today. And then also those are just nice samples of some of the resources we've used to over the last few months to really inform us as we go through these decisions and work together. And again, I just want to say this whole San Ysidro School District caring about kids and working together to make sure we're safe and moving forward has been amazing. So that's how I'm going to wrap up my presentation. Just great teamwork and real passion for education and each other.
Dr. Farkas, this last slide, for each of our open session presentations, we have the last slide is the same. It's asking for board guidance. So with regards to the topics that Dr. Farkas presented, in addition to the questions you posed this evening, we'd like to ask the board, do you have any further guidance or direction that you'd like our staff to go in?
I'll ask this, Trustee Ms. Palasiga, do you have any guidance or direction?
Not at this time. I know that you all are in the trenches chasing a moving target. And especially with this last change of us being moved into the purple tier, I know that was a big, big wrench in the wheel. But I know we'll roll with it. Everybody will roll with it. So onward and upward. I feel like it's a huge, huge lift. Huge. And I know it's across the country. It's not just us, but it is, these are life-changing times. I know I echo everybody's sentiments when I say, we just don't want as much as we can prevent the fallout of kids missing out on education, because when all this is over, they're going to be running the country. They're going to be doing what we're all doing. So, they my heart is with them to enrich them and empower them to live meaningful, productive, and successful lives, and change the wheel of their future generations. Their children and their children's children, and even our students that are struggling right now, even ours that are our homeless population. They're coming to school so that they can change the trajectory of their family's future. So my deep sentiment is with everything that's being done, and whatever you all need from us to empower. I know that our staff is bringing us all the things that are needed for us to vote on, so that we can implement measures that are going to help all of that happen and make all of that happen despite what's going on. So no, I don't have any guidance to offer today. In fact, you all are the ones guiding the ship, and hats off to all of you. This has been an amazing upheaval, amazing. But I think it will end positively. I believe that.
Thank you, Trustee Palacio. Miss Irene.
I was just looking at some of the student support that we had gone over, had been presented to us. And I'm just wondering, regarding special ed or assistance for social services, do we know if, because we've gone into this distant learning, has our, do we have more students now in that area, or how much of an increase do we see? Because that's what worries me to see, and hear some parents say that, they see their kids struggling. And I said, well, that's why you let the teacher know, or you let the principal know. But I'd like to see or hear of the feedback if we're really getting it from the parent regarding the needs of that child. Because I know that we've always had more classrooms with special ed students with different problems. But I'm wondering, do we see an increase of a lot of children, even more now because of this distant learning?
Mrs. Lopez, one of the things that we're in the middle of finishing is Dr. Farkas executed a student survey, and we're waiting to hear back from our students directly how they're doing. Dr. Farkas, can you give me a timeline on that student survey and remind me which grades we were targeting?
So we sent out a survey and had I'd say a pretty fantastic response when it came to our staff, our teachers giving the survey to the students, giving them time and direction. So we were able to gather many surveys, and now the data will be reported out to everyone on, like Dr. Potter said, we can easily find out who's struggling academically through grades and progress, or how many people need support through our food distribution, but it's hard to figure out exactly where our students are emotionally and with support that they may need. So this idea was to get the survey out, to get the data collected, and then to report the data. So when we come out of Thanksgiving break, we'll have the data ready to present not only to the board, but to everyone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. Mr. Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I'd just like to encourage Dr. Potter and your staff to keep doing the good job you guys have been doing, and get us, have us prepared for that moment when we can bring students back to campus in whatever iteration it might be. If we're still in purple or red, or however we're going to do it, I think it's time that we are prepared. And as soon as we can bring, whether it's specialized cohorts or maybe a little bit bigger groups, that we are able to safely bring back those students that not only need but want to come back to campus. I think that's our responsibility, is to be ready to be able to do that as soon as we are able to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, the guidance that I have is the same guidance that I've been emphasizing. It's safety and communication. Safety being the first, obviously the most important thing, not just for students, but also staff. And then communication, which is, and I always use the analogy for those who know me really well, I'm a huge fan of Disney Plus. And I recently watched a movie. It's really a cheesy movie in the 90s. It's called The Mighty Ducks 2. There's 3 Mighty Ducks, but there's the second one. And there's a scene in that movie that where the people, the players, they're playing hockey. They're all like roped together and on ice, and they have skates on and whatnot. And the coach says, Coach Bombay goes, well, you have to work as a team in order to move together. And you know, they have different attempts, and some of them try to go their own way. And I guess the main point is that eventually they get to the point where they're all working together and skating together as a team. So I guess that's the analogy that I want to use in the situation that we are now, that we're all tied together, not just our students and teachers and classified, but all of us together, community members. And the most important thing is that we have that communication to skate together and to get past this.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. First, I just want to congratulate everybody that has been working together, the whole district, really, from top to bottom. And I want to echo what a couple of my colleagues on the board have said. It's just a heavy lift, and I commend everybody that's been working. It's a really difficult puzzle to solve, as Dr. Potter mentioned. I just have brief thoughts. I think that at this point, I would like us to continue working on, like Mr. Lopez says, be ready to open our schools safely. That's the key word. And I think we have the resources to make it safe. We have the people in charge to make it safe. And we have the information now at this point to be safe. Other districts are being very successful in opening, partially, and following guidelines and following all safety recommendations. I think at this point, we're starting to see that this length of time and this type of system, it's not working for a lot of our students, and it's going to cause irreparable harm, not only in terms of academics, but also in terms of social emotional aspects. So I think, like Mr. Lopez says, it's our duty, it's our why we're here, to make sure that we can provide that education to our students. And again, let's look at this in the positive way. We're also, I think, closer to being on the other side of this whole ordeal. And as long as we keep on working together, as Mr. Martinez says, I think we're gonna get there. But ultimately, my comments are thank you to everybody that's been working. Thank you to everybody that's been showing up at the district, at the schools, at each of the schools here in this district, because we can't do it without you. And we will be ready for when that moment comes to open.
Mr. Gurmilan, before we move on to the next item, there was one comment I omitted. I left out. I was re-looking at my notes from this past week. As far as the school reopening, I am definitely of the stance that we really, under every possible circumstance, of course, safety, human life, safety permitting, that we stick to our January opening. That would be my guidance for the superintendent and for cabinet. So with every possible effort, with every possible permittance coming from the state, of course, I just feel that pushing it out, again, it's a fine balance for me between the health and safety of course, students and staff. Yes, that is an absolute, but how much can we sacrifice, to the point that others have made for the emotional, mental, and academic well-being and longevity of our students, because we are students first, and now we're collaboratively students and staff first, collectively. I just don't want to sacrifice not being able to open, even of course under the guidelines and the plans that are already in place. I would prefer that we stick to that. I know we all voted to open in January, so I would not like to push that out any further if at the 50% capacity. So that's my 2 cents on that.
Thank you, Ms. Palacio. Any final comments from anybody? I think I'm supposed to ask that.
So just for my clarity and the team's clarity, in January when it comes, if we are not in the purple tier, it sounds like we're the board's guidance that they already took action on to open in January for blended learning holds. If we are in the purple tier, it's sounding to me like if we collaboratively move with all stakeholders, that specialized cohorting where we can't open for 50%, but could open for up to 25%, is a direction the district team can move in.
I would say yes for me.
Okay, thank you.
You know, from my end, Dr. Potter, it's safety first. So obviously follow the guidelines from the state. That's the most important thing. Second thing is, if we're all on the same page, then I'm fine with what you propose. But make sure that we're all on the same page and that we're all moving together on that. Just because that's really the priority, to make sure that everyone knows what's going to happen and that safety is the priority.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. Thank you for Mrs. Pelisigue for clarifying. All right, we have several more presentations, and I told our team they only had 15 minutes each so that we could have more time to listen to the board for board guidance. Mr. President, do you mind if we move on to the second one, 6.1B?
Please go ahead.
Good evening.
So this one is our educational services. It's our COVID-19 instructional programs update that will be presented by our Executive Director of Educational Services, Cynthia Gonzalez. And we have two staff members, also administrators, that have about a single slide each where they'll come in and co-present with her, our Director of Special Education, Oscar Madera, and our Coordinator of Community Schools and After School Programs, Omar Calleros. So Cynthia Gonzalez.
Good evening, Board President, members of the board, Dr. Potter, Cabinet, and members of the community. Tonight, our team is here to share with you information about instructional programs and an update as to where we are at the moment. What you'll notice throughout the presentation is that all of us in our presentations kind of took the same lens of information that was presented initially and looked at it through the lens of our department. So this first slide just shows kind of an amended instructional phases. So it really speaks about what Dr. Farkas shared about the purple and the red tier. Last time we brought this to you, we had the third phase with assuming that we would be in the red tier or in a better place at this point in time. And in January, be ready to launch that Distance Learning Academy with the optional blended learning program and a Pathway Sports program. However, since we've moved into the purple tier, we've just amended it to add an extra column that indicates if we were to remain in the purple tier, that a possible program option for us would be to maintain the Distance Learning Academy, launch that limited specialized cohorts that were covered in Dr. Farkas's presentation, and continue with that limited Pathway Sports program that Omar will speak a little bit in detail about as we get through this presentation. When we look at that limited specialized cohorts, we're really talking about specialized groups that can begin instruction at school for part of the time. Those are students who we would consider to be at risk based on some of the data that Dr. Potter spoke about. These could be students who are our English learners, our foster youth, students who are receiving special education services, and students who are experiencing homelessness. The important thing to remember that this is a limited group that we would be allowed to bring to our campuses. It could be no more than 25% of the total student population on any campus. So if we had a campus where we had 400 students enrolled, we could bring 100 students back to that campus in those groups of no more than 14 in each of the classrooms. Our timeline for the implementation of phase 3, if we went in one of those two directions that we've shared with you tonight, would still be for on January 7th, which is the first day back from the winter break, for teachers to begin with the teacher that they will be assigned for the rest of the school year, and for that to begin as an at-home for a few days, where we're kind of phasing into this new type of instruction. The week of January 11th, we would see some of the groups from preschool, TK through second grade and seventh grade begin to have some on-campus instruction. And then the week of January 19th, we would start to include grades 3 through 6 and 8th graders in that on-campus instruction, so that we're not bringing everyone back on the very first day all at the same time, but it gives us a little bit of time to make sure that all of our safety protocols are in line and that we're able to mitigate any issues that come up as we start to open slowly. This is just to give you guys the data that we are kind of basing, and you'll see when Ms. Gonzalez, the Executive Director of HR, does her presentation, her staffing is kind of based on these numbers, where, as you know, we spent a great deal of time surveying our families and getting information about whether they wanted to remain in distance learning for the entire school year or shift to blended learning when it became available. When we look at the data in whole, about 39% of our families want to remain in distance learning for the entire year, and 61% of our families district-wide are interested in bringing their students back to campus a couple of days a week in a blended learning model. And we have a couple of schools, Sunset, where 72% want to come back to that blended learning model, and then Sims, where it's only 53%. But on average, we're looking at about 40% to remain in distance learning, and 60% who would be interested in that blended learning on-campus model. And then this next slide is about our distance learning support program, and I'm going to ask Mr. Gallegos to share this with you, as this is his work.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you again for having me here. Thank you, Cynthia, for that. And first and foremost, I'd like to thank everybody that's been involved in making this happen. This really couldn't have been done or completed without the help of all the different sectors and groups in our district, and the leadership from our administration as well. So our distance learning support programs, can jump right in here. We do offer an in-person care program. So the object to that is to offer support to the students that are struggling and meet the ACES guidelines. And at the same time, the parents are essential parents and don't have means or an opportunity for care. And we are following all the Health and Human Services county guidelines, along with the San Diego County of Ed guidelines. This is an ACES program. So we have to follow the consortium guidelines as well. So currently we do have cohorts of 10 students to 1 adult. And we have a transition team where we have an AM staff group. And then in the afternoon, we transition to the PM staff group, since most of the staff employed by the YMCA are part-time. So as you can imagine, that then takes away 2 staff members for a group of 10, and our ability to serve all day becomes limited because of those group sizes. So what we've done is we consolidated 2 schools into 1 school site to be able to maximize the staff ratio. So for example, Sunset services Willow. So we have Willow students over at the Sunset school site. Smythe services La Mirada. Sims has VDM students on site. And then OVH sticks to their own because it's a pretty big school, and they can fill in a lot of spots on their own. Currently, we have the ability, because of staff ratio size, to serve up to 180 students. We do see on a day-to-day that number fluctuates. For example, today we had 121 students that participated today. Times of operation, because this is for essential parents, we open up as early as 7:30. So we have the ability to accept parents, kids, for parents that need to go to work a little bit earlier. And program ends at 4 p.m. In the program, we offer the students breakfast, lunch, and then a snack as well. Once the distance learning instruction has ended, we transition into an enrichment program where students then engage in several different arts, activities, STEAM, and also outside play. We do encourage for the students to go outside in rotation and get some fresh air whenever possible as well. We have given all our YMCA staff a Google account, a school district Google account, so that they have access to the students' learning classroom. So that way, if there's any hiccup or the student needs additional help, they're able to help transition that student into connecting with their class, or at the same time, just maybe helping them with their homework after class has ended as well. We are working currently right now with the YMCA and an organization called Macbeth Academy to offer the virtual tutoring. We think that's going to be a great addition for the students that just need some help and encouragement to complete their homework, or just might need some just a second voice to help them complete their homework or classwork as well. So we're going to be offering that and opening that up to the students that are not part of the distance learning program or in-person program. So hopefully we can impact more students in their transition in distance learning and such. Along with that, as mentioned before, we have sports pathways that we're looking excited to start up once we are out of the purple and able to come back. Our biggest focus is safety and following all the guidelines. So all the sports would be a clinic style sport. So we want kids to really get out there to learn a sport, to get moving and have fun. And exercise and movement is one of those things that I think a lot of kids have been missing. And we hear that kids get a little bit of cabin fever and get antsy. So we're looking to implement that and offer that at every school site once we come back to blended learning. We're currently working with all the coaches that have offered sports throughout the Pathways program, whether it was last year or the previous year. They are interested, and so right now we're accepting their ideas of the classes they are comfortable offering at the school site once we come back to blended learning. We are also waiting for Sweetwater to see if they are going to reintroduce their middle school athletic league. We're in lockstep as far as what the guidelines are, but if they are able to do that and we're able to come back and offer middle school sports, we have informed them that we will be interested in participating in that league as well. And as far as like STEAM and enrichment, we have a great group of sci-fi teachers, and Ms. Elba de Vaca has taken the initiative to create a Science for Girls program that we will be accepting sponsorship and help from the Reuben H. Fleet Science Center. And so they're already looking to start that. They started that with girls and recruited. And also at both our middle schools, we have through the Windward Academy, teachers are teaching kids on how to prepare for tests so that they can move on to like a high school or collegiate level. So the state level tests, graduation tests and such. So the Windward Academy is currently being offered through at Vista Del Mar students and for San Isidro Middle School students as well. And that's it for all of our enrichment components.
I want to thank Mr. Galleros and for putting together all 4 or 3 of these programs for our school district, especially during this difficult time. These are programs that have heavy COVID regulations for safety. They're not easy to launch. And so the fact that we've been able to have all 3 worked on at the same time is very important for access to our students. Some clarity on that Pathway Sports program. The sports also has another layer of COVID safety guidelines by the state health department. So I just want to be clear, because I don't want us to get so excited. We will not be allowed to do competitive sports. So we're not going to be allowed to do games against other teams. There's just a lot of rules. We can't do indoor sports. It has to be all outdoors, and the sports have to be in stable cohorts, and there's a limited number to each cohort. So we're excited to launch it. I just don't want us to think that it's like last year when we had no COVID. There are many safety rules that we will enforce for the safety of our children and our staff. So I'm excited about it. I do think that much of what I see and hear from children is their eagerness to get outside and just feeling like they're stuck in the house and constantly looking at the computer screen. So whatever we can do to help them come outside, I think is very important. Right, we have several other slides, so let's keep moving.
Can I ask a question on this finalizing agreement and virtual tutoring with Macbeth Academy? Is that coming out of our district or is it coming through YMCA?
That would be coming through the YMCA.
And there will be no charge for us extra?
An
For the-
outstanding question.
There will
Yeah.
be for additional, it would include manpower, so additional hours for those additional staff.
Okay.
So basically, we've contracted with the YMCA to provide the in-person care. And in that same contract, we asked them to also provide virtual tutoring. Because their staffing is limited, they're looking at subcontracting the virtual tutoring component to the Macbeth company. That, I believe, is what's happening. Is that correct, Mr. Calleros?
That is correct. So I guess
would
to,
like-
to clarify, it won't be an additional cost to what we have budgeted and allocated towards those services. So everything would be within the cost that the board had approved to spend. So there will be no additional cost above and beyond that.
And I'd like for you to be really aware that I complained because I didn't see that going last year with our 7th and 8th graders that are no longer in our district though. But that was something that I did not see happening in YMCA tutoring the kids. And that was important for our 7th and 8th graders because they needed that support and they weren't given that support. So I really, really would like for you to really look at this Macbeth Academy and be on top of it to make sure that they are tutoring, especially our middle school kids. They need our help right now before they leave us. It's very important for them to continue in the high school. Okay, that's all I would like to see.
Absolutely. We'll make sure we'll stay on top of it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So the next slide is going to cover special education, and Mr. Madera is going to speak to that.
Good evening, board members, Mr. President, Dr. Potter, and Cabinet. I'm just going to give you a brief of what our department has been focusing on and what we'll be doing in the future, in COVID future. We are currently doing educational assessment testing for some of our students that had pending assessments from back in March. So we've been working on that with any initials or triennials. Obviously following physical distancing and very specific protocols. We're also focusing on students that were only receiving speech and language services individually. We also have some additional assessments that are part of the process. However, depending on the type of assessment, we'll be able to do them virtually, and some of them we would have to wait until the students come back to school physically. We are currently running virtual meetings that includes IEP meetings, including annuals and triennials. Some of our parents are becoming more savvier with computers and more comfortable with computers. And for some of them that are not comfortable, then they have the option of calling into the meeting and being able to participate in the IEP process. We're also currently holding student study team meetings as well for those students that Dr. Potter was mentioning before that might be struggling academically or even behaviorally or emotionally. So that's something that the site teams have been working on with the site administration. Our department has been holding professional development for classified staff and certificated staff, just basically in regards to any current information from the state and how this impacts our special education department and our special education programs. And with classified, working on providing that mental health support to some of our students, and also how to provide, how to navigate Google Classroom and the Google platform. We're also holding speech and language meetings, including school psychologist meetings. And also this year we were lucky enough to have 5 school psych interns that are supporting our programs. So we're also holding meetings individually to help them out through this process. And that way they can be an asset to our students and to our department. Also, we're holding one-on-one meetings with some of our certificated staff that require some additional support when it comes to navigating the IEP process, especially since per the state, we have to complete another form aside of doing the IEP. There's an additional form that needs to be completed legally. So we've been working with them closely. Our school district, and as you know, at our previous board, one of our previous board meetings, the board approved a an MOU with an outside agency to provide mental health services to all students in our district. So South Bay Community Services has been collaborating with us and providing that service. This is our second to third week working with them, and they are currently scheduling meetings with the site teams in order to provide students with the supports that they require. Our psychologists have been providing counseling services per the IEP. We will also be doing, we've been doing YES referrals to youth enhancement services for any students that qualify and they meet the criteria for youth enhancement, and having bi-weekly collaboration meetings with the staff from the YES program. Also, some of our students that are receiving a higher level of mental health services per the IEP have been receiving those services from our school social worker virtually and or parents as well. So we do include a component for parent counseling as well. During distance learning, we model and continue to provide a similar program as the ones in general education. Obviously, there's some changes that we need to make in order to provide the supports that some of our students require. Some of our students are able to do it via the computer. Others choose to still do it via paper. So our teachers and school staff have become very creative as to how we are providing our students access to the curriculum. Again, continue providing DIS services, which include speech and language services, occupational therapy, adaptive physical education, and any other type of counseling. And also the mainstreaming component with since it's very important for our students to continue to have access to the general curriculum, we have gotten very creative as to how to give them access to that general education environment. During blended, this is something that we're working with Ms. Gonzalez's department as to how are we going to get creative once we start with blended learning, and how are we going to provide our students with access to the services that they require. More than likely for some of our student services will continue to be virtual, just so that way we have a better control of cross-contamination and also the virtual mainstreaming as well. Thank you.
Mr. Madera, I want to commend you on having this. I saw that it was, you put stars special as for parent counseling. I think that's real important. And I know several parents that have received a lot of guidance. And I know I sent them to you because I told them, you need to speak to Mr. Madera. And if any problem you may have, he'll find a way. He'll find a way. So I want to thank you for that, because I think, you know, parents, some of them that are working, it's a lot of stress for them. And sometimes they've been absent from work because they worry about their kids. But I want to commend you on that, because I think that's real important. Not only our social workers that are working with our kids that need a lot more help and, you know, mentally and physically, but I want to thank you for that. I think that's really important. And I know it's not easy, but I'm glad it's on here, because forgot about that, but I remember I gave your name to a lot of parents. I told them to talk with you. And I said, he'll know what to do or direct you to whom you can, because some lady was involved with the high school. And I said, well, we're in elementary. But you know what? I told, call SELPA. And she looked at me, what's that? I go, has your child ever been special ed? She goes, no, well, Sweetwater has SELPA. You need to call them. Do you know their number? I go, no, but you can call Sweetwater Union High and ask for SELPA and tell them what your problem is. But I think that's, a lot of our parents are not aware of what, you know, what's around there, what they really can get resources. But I know that a lot of them were very well satisfied, and they felt like peace, that they were able to find help in any way. So I think that's real important. So thank you very much for that. I think our parents need that.
And thank you for recognizing our department. It's everyone in our department works very hard. So thank you for that. And I forgot to mention, right now that you're mentioning SELPA, we actually have a video training that we did, Ms. Cordero and I, a couple of weeks ago, and it's actually on our website drop-down menu, and it's all about SELPA. So anybody that you can refer them to that video. We might not have the best voices, but we did our best job at recording it.
Okay, thank you. It's good.
I believe there's one last slide here for Ms. Gonzalez. So if we,
Yeah,
there we
the
go.
last piece of information that I wanted to share was just the state assessment update. The state assessments are continuing this year. I know last year they were put on hold in the spring. This year, the state is moving forward with the requirements for assessing. So the LPAC, which is the English Language Performance Assessment of California, there's two pieces to that. The initial assessment is what we use when we have a new student to us to assess their language capacity if it's been identified that their home language is not English. So that just identifies their level. Typically, we have a 30-day from enrollment deadline. That deadline has been increased to 75 days for this school year due to COVID and the difficulties with remote testing. We will also have a summative assessment. That assessment is designed to measure progress from year to year for our English learners. That assessment window has not changed. It will be from February 1st to May 31st. And that assessment, both of these assessments have maintained their length. They were not shortened, and we'll see with our other assessment system that there were some changes in terms of length of assessment. So our other assessment system is CAST, which is the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress. So those are more commonly referred to as SBAC, which is the consortium that we use that writes the assessments for the state. The State Board of Education did approve a revision in these assessments. The English language arts and the math components of these assessments have two pieces. They have a multiple choice piece and they have a performance task. The multiple choice piece is going to be shortened for this year just for those two assessments to help reduce the expected time of completion for students. But the performance tasks, which are the written parts of the assessment where students are asked to write short paragraphs or a longer essay, those will remain intact and be the same length. So we are still looking at about a 3 to 4 day testing window for our students when they were on campus taking this type of assessment. We were looking at about a 5-day window for each area. Online, I'm going to say that typically just based on LPAC, we are looking at almost twice as long to take an assessment for students. So they are shortening it, which will help with that, but just those two pieces. The California science test will remain the same and is not going to be shortened. And it's not on here, but the California alternative assessment, which some of our special education students take, will also not be shortened. It will be the same length of assessment. So then our last slide is just asking for your guidance on the topics that we shared with you this evening.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. I'm going to ask Trustee Palasiga first. Ms. Palasiga, do you have any final comments or guidance? All right, I'll move on to Ms. Irene Lopez. Any final guidance?
No, just I'm glad to hear that the multiple choice was shortened. I think it was lengthy, and I think it confused a lot of our kids though too. But I'm glad that they did make that change, and I know that there's a lot of things that they changed because of this COVID, and they're thinking about our kids and also their mentality of being stressed out and trying to finish and do. But there's some parts of these that are still intact, which they need, which I think it's great that the written part remains because our kids need to actually practice to write, learn to write. It's very important for them to continue. And the science part is also so, the window for that 5 days is great, gives, I think, actually gives them time in order to do all this. And I know it's not easy for all of you, but thank you, Cynthia. That was good information that you gave us. But I'm glad to see how they did shorten some and did remain the same. And sometimes it's very hard to make those decisions, but it's for the best for our kids. So thank you for all the information and the work that you do to give us all this information. A lot of work. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Irene. Mr. Lopez?
No guidance for me on this. Thank you, Cynthia and your staff for your hard work and keep it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Martinez?
No, great presentation, all of you. This is great. Frankly, very impressed. Just keep it up. Again, the same recommendation I gave everyone else, which is safety and communication. But overall, great job.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez, and I'll echo what Mr. Martinez said. Just thank you, Ms. Gonzalez, for all the hard work and everybody that's been working on this. We really, really appreciate it.
Great, thank you.
Any other comments, final comments from anybody? Okay. Thank you. So that moves us on from 6.1b to 6.1c, which is staffing for various school reopening instructional phases and programs. Executive Director of Human Resources, Ms. Linda Gonzalez.
Good evening, Board President, members of the board, Dr. Potter, and members of the community. You've heard a lot about COVID instructional phase 3 today from both Dr. Farkas and from Cynthia. And so I'm going to look at it from a different lens, which is the staffing piece. So we'll start with the first slide. As presented in Cynthia's presentation, these are the two phase 3 instructional options that we're looking at. The first instructional option is if we are back in the red tier, which is the blended learning option with a distance learning academy as well. The second option for phase 3 in January is specialized cohorts if we remain in the purple tier, which as mentioned before is limited specialized cohorts for at-risk students. Some staffing considerations for phase 3 as a whole. We've looked at the family survey number 3 results. Those results showed us that about approximately 60% of our families wanted their students in blended learning come January, and approximately 40% of families would like their students in distance learning come January. We've also considered all staff remote work requests. Staff did submit requests via email with supporting documents so that we could verify their eligibility. We've considered the physical space of each classroom. On average, most of our classrooms allow us to have 12 students per cohort. And then, of course, the final consideration is our tier rating in San Diego County and the difference between the red tier option versus the purple tier option. Next slide, please. So we'll start by looking at program choices by site and grade at each of our elementary schools. This shows the 5 elementary schools and how many families chose distance versus blended learning in each grade level at each school. You'll see the totals at the bottom for each school, with them all averaging right about the 60-40% for our elementary schools. Thank you. The next slide shows the same information, but for our middle schools, distance versus blended learning. And these numbers on the last 2 slides that we've shown is how we move forward with staffing projections. So we can go to the next slide, please. Finally, the other important program choice to look at is those families who chose distance learning district-wide. The reason for that is because we have to staff the Distance Learning Academy from a district-wide perspective. For example, the students that chose, or the families that chose distance learning for their students in TK total 30 students. So for our Distance Learning Academy, we would look at staffing for 30 students. This does mean that students from different sites would be together in a class during the Distance Learning Academy. For example, some of the TK students may be from Ocean View, and some from La Mirada, some from Willow, where their family selected they remain in distance learning, and they would come together into a distance learning classroom. So we looked at those numbers at in each grade level, district-wide TK through 8. Next slide, please.
That's really interesting, Linda. What's the feedback from parents or on possibly having to leave their normal school site and go to another school site? Or have we had any? Have we? Not really.
We haven't had entire discussions on that. I think that in our family survey number 3, we did explain that there may be some changes to the placement of the students. Students would still belong to the school in which they normally belong to. It would just be for the period of distance learning that they might change. And really the purpose of that comes back to the staffing piece. We have to do our best to staff with the current number of FTE that we have. And so that means we have to combine, for the Distance Learning Academy, we have to be able to combine schools.
Also, Linda, I know that I was present on some of the principals' meetings with parents, and the main concern is that they wanted, they asked if I want to do it in person, will my child receive will get the same teacher? And then principals did let them know it just depends how many children that are going to come in or be able to come in, and depends on how many are going to be the distance learning. But I know that several of the parents says, well, I don't want them to be moved to another classroom because this is hard on them. But I don't think they thought or even were kind of given a hint that maybe it would be done like now, and I know that you need to do it. You have to do something because not all teachers are able to come back. That's the other problem, I know. And we want to service our kids the best we can. So this will be given to, will the parents be known about this later on? Be given that information? That's what I'm kind of asking, because some of these parents were kind of like, oh no, I don't want that for my child. But the principal, I know Mr. Little explained to him, Tom, it just depends how many kids are going to come on board and which are not. And it depends on the staffing. But I don't think they really, realize that. But will there be something sent out to them explaining, this? Because I think that's real important.
I will work with Ms. Gonzalez in the Educational Services Department, but I do believe that each principal is going to notify families of their placement, just like we do at the beginning of the year. I think we're better off in that way because there may be some changes. And it might be helpful for parents just to know for sure where their students going come January. I also know that there was another questionnaire sent about which date would be best to move students. And so I do think that for the most part, our parents understand that any movement with teachers would happen in January.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We want to create the least movement possible, not only for staff, but also for students, because we understand how difficult this is for everyone. And we're trying to do that within our means.
Okay. Thank you, Linda.
Of course, thank you.
I think a lot of it is a matter of perspective. If I, as a parent, view something as a lateral move, then it feels less impactful. I mean, there's so much concern. I think especially for younger kids, that environment change is so crucial. I can definitely see the concern. So whatever we can do to just overly communicate, I know you all will. I know everybody will when the time comes, but I know we worry for the littles. But
of course.
Yeah, thank you for that information.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next slide, which shows percentages. Cynthia showed some of this information in her presentation as well, but it just breaks it down to give us a look that overall we're trending at about 60% of our students back in blended learning and about 40% in distance learning. Next slide, please. Okay. So based off of all of those numbers that I just presented, we projected staff for the blended learning option. So this is the projection of FTE, full-time staff, needed at each elementary school by grade level. You will see that these numbers are lower than their typical number of FTE because some of the staff would be dedicated to distance learning. And just for a note, we are considering the remote work request for those that might need to stay in a distance learning environment in these staffing numbers. One final note on this, one final note on that slide, you will see a lot of half FTEs, and that just means that we may need to look at the number of students in a grade level to be able to properly staff on site as well. And it is also dependent upon classroom physical space and the cohort size that we create. Next slide, please. This is the same information for the middle schools. The number of full-time staff needed, each grade level at each site. You will note that at the middle schools, it's a little bit different because we need teachers by subject area. And then sometimes one teacher, for example, an English teacher could have a couple periods of 7th grade and a couple periods of 8th grade. Next slide. And then the projected staffing for distance learning is the final slide, is the final slide of projected staffing, which goes back to that original chart we had for students in distance learning. This would be staff that are dedicated to teaching the distance learning academy. So for TK, for example, it looks like we would need 2 staff, so two classes of TK in our distance learning academy. So in summary, this is our total projected staffing need by grade, district-wide. You'll see the total rounded FTE. Rounding the FTE allows us just to make sure we're within class size. And then the current FTE by grade level. And I apologize, I just realized the total down there is, the green total is incorrect, but the red total is really what we're looking at. It looks like we're currently short about 7 classroom teachers to be able to fully staff our blended learning and distance learning academy. And I want to make a note that we currently have 5 teachers assigned to the district office. They're currently providing support at different elementary schools, but they would be moved back into the staffing for either distance learning or blended learning.
So Linda, I have a quick question. How many teachers do we have on staff right now?
We have 165 on staff right now.
Okay.
This is general education teachers.
Yeah. No. And I guess my question would be, how does that correspond with your projections? Do you feel that we'll have enough teachers on both sides, the blended and the distance learning?
I do believe that with our current staff district-wide, and obviously with adjustments taking place, we will have enough staff to fully staff phase 3, whatever that might look like, without having to hire additional staff. We did bring on a few extra temporary teachers about 2 months ago. So with that, we should have sufficient staff to fully staff our phase 3.
Great.
Next slide, please. The other phase 3 option that we've briefly discussed is the specialized cohort. So for specialized cohort, we have different staffing guidance. As mentioned, we can have up to 25% of our school student population as part of a specialized cohort, with those cohorts being a max of 16 people, 14 students, and then 2 adults for each group. Our specialized cohort model would aim to serve at-risk students, such as English learners, homeless and foster youth, students receiving special education services, and those that are facing learning loss mitigation. So our next steps for specialized cohorts is to create and hold collaborative work group meetings, which would include site admins such as principals, our union leadership, and cabinet. Once we collaborate on what specialized cohorts might look like a little more specifically, then we will look at staffing needs. As you can imagine, we wouldn't need as many staff on site if we're in a specialized cohort model compared to a full blended learning model. And then, of course, we will meet with both unions to bargain the impacts and effects of moving into a specialized cohort if needed. And then just any board guidance is greatly appreciated as we move towards finalizing our staffing.
Thank you, Linda. I'll start with Ms. Palasiga. Do you have any guidance?
None for me. Thank you for that. We needed those ratios and those numbers, so very specific. You have it down to a hair. So that's, I know you all are looking at it as finitely as possible. Thank you for that. but no questions for me, no guidance.
Thank you, Ms. Palacio. Ms. Irene Lopez?
No, I just worried about that. I just wondered, well, I don't know if it would be you, Linda, would answer, but I know that some parents says that if we are not able to go back in the classroom, that they were going to pull their kids out. And I said, well, it's not up to us. It's how, the county, the state, how they see this epidemic. So I'm hoping that they understand that. But did you guys ever think that what if those kids don't come back? If we can't go into blended learning?
I mean, isn't it the same whether they go to the next neighboring district? I mean, it's going to be a similar encounter situation that they're going to encounter. I mean,
We're finding they're pivoting to homeschooling and to certain charter schools. And so for us, it becomes a exacerbated declining enrollment.
Doesn't that also, Dr. Potter, that I'm wondering, in that county office, did they say, I don't remember them even mentioning the charter schools. Will the charter schools be able to go back?
If they're already open, if they opened earlier in the year, before we hit a purple tier, then they can stay open, the charters and the private schools and the public schools, right? So what we found statewide is the private schools and the charter schools opened mostly open before the public schools opened. And so those schools are open, they already opened, and even though we're in the purple tier, they get to stay open. For the public schools that have not yet opened, and now they're in the purple tier in their county, our opening is limited to the specialized cohorts or for an elementary school waiver. Our district at this time, we're not proposing the elementary school waiver. We really are looking at targeting for the most at-risk students.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, the soonest that schools would be able to open again in San Diego County after we hit the purple tier last week, it's 5 weeks, okay? So that 5-week period is December 16th. If the county comes out of the purple tier by December 16th, then we can go back to our first plan, which was to reopen for blended learning in January, and we wouldn't have to pivot to the specialized cohorts.
Okay.
Yeah. So we kind of have to watch that December 16th date and hope that we're in the red tier by then. It's a little bit difficult. We are in flu season, and the COVID cases are spiking in the state. So we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, I did notice apparently the counties, they advertise they're going to start a curfew. They're implementing a COVID safety curfew. I think it starts Saturday of this week. And so people have to be indoors, inside, starting Saturday by 10 o'clock and not outside all the way till 5 a.m. in the morning. So it's a 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. curfew. That should help. That should help a lot.
I think all the cities are beginning to do that because LA Unified started that. Yeah.
I saw that notification earlier this evening. What are the hours again?
I'm reading off my mother's text, so I'm hoping I'm really, she's a retired teacher of 36 years, so she's really good at this stuff. So she said curfew starts Saturday, 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. And she explicitly told me to tell my children.
10 p.m. to 5 a.m. So when we're asleep, don't be out walking around.
I think they're assuming that socialization that happens late at night, probably at things like bars and things like that.
Some of us go to bed a little bit later.
Yeah.
I think they're just trying to
9 p.m. kind of gal, but I don't know. Okay.
I kind of like 10 o'clock. So, but anyway, curfew starts Saturday.
And And just to emphasize, it's going to last a month. So it's going to go until
Oh,
December
I didn't know that. It's December what?
21st.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, wow, they timed that perfectly because their target's December 16th. So, okay, December 21st, everyone. All right. Any other board guidance, Mr. Gamilan? I think we got a little sidetracked. Sorry.
Yes, Mr. Lopez, you good?
I'm good, and I'm definitely out from 10 to 5 a.m. So,
Mr. Martinez, no comments? No further?
Yeah, no, my only thought is that the bottom line is, unless something significantly changes, my guess is that we're going to continue to be in the purple tier for the near future. And this is past December 16th. And this is me being a realist. My thought is, obviously it's great that we're preparing for both. The other thing that we have to keep in mind is, I know, Linda, you mentioned the requests by staff who might have chronic conditions and might have family members that have chronic conditions. How are we looking to at least addressing those issues so we don't have to worry, so that when we do open, that staff overall feel safe?
We've done our best to communicate with staff and make sure we have updated documentation, Mr. Martinez. As long as we have the documents on file, which I will say most people have submitted them, and those that haven't, I've been in contact with.
Great.
We are doing our absolute best to make sure no one with a chronic condition or with a COVID-related issue needs to be on campus. And I do think that we'll get pretty close to being able to do that for those staff who've made the request and submitted proper documentation.
Yeah, that's very important. Obviously, my guess is that we're going to be in the purple tier, so it might not be that big of an issue because most of them will continue to do distance learning. But just keep that in mind, that's very important. Just great job. Great presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. It's quick question. I heard at another meeting, I think there's a shortage of subs, but I don't think that impacts us, right? I've heard there's a shortage of substitute teachers. I don't know if we'll need them or anything like that. I don't know if it'll impact us.
Yeah, so there is a shortage of substitute teachers statewide. There has been for a while, and it seems to be a little amplified right now. It does impact us because we're still utilizing our substitutes to substitute even right now in distance learning. But I do think we're doing a really great job of trying to make sure we have a lot of subs on board. Not only is our pool still close to 100 subs for teaching, but Ms. Gonzalez in the Ed Services Department and her team worked to create a Google training for our subs. And we've been holding those Google trainings about once a month and leaving it open to any sub who wants to come attend the training. And as soon as they've attended the training, we activate them and get them ready to start subbing. And that list is growing. I want to say we're at about 40 something Google trained certificated substitutes, which is really great because then they're not just taking the assignment, but they're taking the assignment and knowing how to take over the distance learning class.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for the presentation, all the information. Everybody's doing a really great job. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. That concludes our 6.1C item. And that'll move us to 6.1D, budget update and COVID recession / declining enrollment budget reduction planning. Chief Business Official, Marilyn Adrianson, and Executive Director of Human Resources, Linda Gonzalez. The mic is yours.
Good evening, Board President, Mr. Gurmilan, members of the board, Dr. Potter, and community. The Business Services Department will provide a budget update and the impacts of the COVID-19 recession and declining enrollment on the district's budget. We will also take a look at the 2021-22 proposed budget reduction plan. In June 2020, the state's adopted budget funded Proposition 98, known as the education budget, at 1920 ADA, average daily attendance levels, in the amount of $70.9 billion. This is a significant drop from the governor's January proposal of $84 billion. So that it was a reduction of $13.1 billion to Proposition 98. The impact to our district is a reduction of $1.3 million in LCFF funds. The COLA is set at 0% in 2021, and the grade span adjustment funding is $801 per ADA, which is already built into the LCFF calculation. So that's $1.45 million. On this slide is the top 6 financial issues that are impacting our budget. So due to the COVID-19 induced recession, it is still undetermined what the COLA will look like for 21-22. So if we are given, or if the state decides on a 0% COLA, our estimated reduction amount would be $5.2 million. And if the state imposes a negative 4% COLA on LCFF, that's an impact of a negative $7 million on our budget, for our budget. Number 2 is the cash deferrals. So the state cash deferrals is about $13 billion, and the impact to our district is $11.6 million. So those are cash deferrals from February 2021 through June 2021 to next fiscal year, 21-22. So we will not see our cash in the amount of $11.6 million, which means we will have to borrow from our temporary transfer of funds, known as the TTF, or request for a cash deferral exemption from the state, which I plan to work on next week or this weekend. There's an application has been released this week.
Ms. Adrienne, the Legislative Analyst's Office published a state updated finance projection or budget report yesterday. When it comes to these deferrals, is it possible in January with the adjusted state revenues that the Legislative Analyst's Office is projecting that some of these deferrals could be unwound?
Yes, today we had our CBO symposium, and it most, at least half, if not more, will be addressed because of the increase in state revenues.
And would we find that out in January at the January governor's budget?
Possibly.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah,
that the
probably
state
in January.
probably won't adjust their budget till they release the governor's budget, proposed budget in January.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Adrianson, in that same regard, would the COLA estimates be adjusted, or is that only for 21-22 and not 2021?
2021 is already set at 0%. So the COLAs listed here is for the estimate for 21-22. For if the state eliminates the cash deferrals, it may not impact the COLA. We just don't know at this time until January. I think the best bet may be a 0% COLA, but until we see those actual revenues come in, we don't really know. Okay. Number 3, the CARES and ESSER funds help to save our budget this year. And it's only a one-time only funding source for 2021. In next fiscal year, 21-22, we will not have these funds to save us, which means we will need to implement a budget reduction plan. So currently, in this fiscal year, we receive $6.3 million just for this year. So for next year, we don't get those funds for next year. 4 is the declining enrollment, TK through 8th grade. We anticipate.
Marilyn?
Uh-huh.
So sorry. Going
okay.
back to 3, that's presupposing that there isn't another stimulus package being passed by the federal government.
Correct. That's correct.
Nevertheless, this is good. It's a worst case scenario, but I just want to emphasize that at least based on right now, that's what it looks like.
Correct.
Okay.
You're correct. So the number 4, we have our declining enrollment. We project for 21-22 a decline of 100 students, which the dollar impact would be about $1 million to our budget. And then for preschool in this school year, the enrollment declined by 97 students. So the fiscal impact, if it continues for next year in 21-22, will be a loss in revenues of $500,000. So for preschool, their current state preschool program receives about $1.4 million. So with the loss of students, that'll be dropped to about $900,000.
I noticed, Miss Marilyn, that on the chart that maybe Miss Gonzalez was showing that that the highest percentage of students that families would prefer to return their children to blended learning is from preschool.
Okay.
They've got, so I wonder if that would help at all with this preschool enrollment.
Yeah, that would help significantly.
It's probably difficult for the preschool, the little ones, to do the online learning.
Yes.
Preschool tends to be more hands-on
Hands-on.
activities.
Mm-hmm.
They have great stuff like Play-Doh and tricycles. I taught preschool.
Number 5, COVID will impact the Child Nutrition Fund as well, and may require a contribution from the general fund anywhere from $150,000 to $250,000. We still, at this time, Child Nutrition is offering the community feeding, but until we see the revenues, what that looks like, we just don't know at this time if the cafeteria fund will need a contribution from the general fund.
And this was one of the audit findings that our Director of Child Nutrition and you, Miss Marilyn, were working so hard to reverse.
Mm-hmm. And
it felt like when we hit unaudited actuals of last year, that contribution from the general fund that had been about, I don't know, 450,000 dropped down to only 25,000.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to see this, when the kids aren't here to eat the meals for breakfast and with the schools closed, even though we're feeding thousands of meals.
Right.
Not all the parents are driving through, huh?
Correct. Yes. And then we are using a different program, the Seamless Summer program. So the calculation is different compared to the National School Lunch Program. So we won't know the impacts until probably sometime January or February.
Marilyn, could you look into, I know I have relatives who work with, I know it's a bigger district, but they're saying how come we did not, how come we weren't giving out food? I go, we do give it out at 2 of our schools, I go. And it's for families and it gives them, because they were telling me they have, I don't know, maybe it's a different program, but they were saying that they have relatives in National City that they have the same kind of program where they only give, they give twice a week, but 1 week on Mondays, it's for that whole week that they give them breakfast, lunch, and dinner and the food that they give them. But then on Friday, she says they give them the weekend. And I go, isn't that a lot? Well, we get a lot more people on Fridays because parents are either working or out of town commuting. And we find that we get more people on Fridays than we do on Mondays. And I thought, well, we give them out on Wednesdays. And then there's one school that does give them out on Fridays, but that's only one school. So I asked her, can you give me the name of the company that you get this food? Oh, it's the food bank, but there's another one, Sunnyside. She said, "That's Sunnyside." And I said, yeah, it's a company that we get the milk, we get the cheese, and we get veggies also. And I said, really? Yeah. And when we give them out, we try to make it, they already come, I guess they're already come packaged because she says they're in that net type. And it's about 5 onions, 5 oranges, 5 apples. And I said, but what if there's more children in the family? Then we have another box that it has for more children in the family, but not that much. She goes, we had maybe 4 or 5 more in each one. I go, oh, that's a lot of work. She told me, well, we're doing it now, and it seems to work good because on Fridays we have more people and our food isn't being wasted. And I thought, so I don't know, maybe you look into that.
Yeah, I know Evelyn, Ms. Zarzosa is listening. So I know she's on our YouTube channel. So I'm sure she heard all that you said.
Yeah, because I know the Boys Club, well, the rec center has a lunch program. But when I went to go look to see how many people, a lot of people walk with their kids to pick it up as a lunch. And it's very simple, just a bag. And it gives them sandwiches, milk, and a fruit.
Okay.
And that's done Monday through Friday.
I know we are serving 7 breakfasts and 7 lunches per child. So they are receiving food for the entire week, breakfast and lunch. Yeah.
That's funny. I go, because we only do it once, and I know we have which is, well, maybe they should try and change it. Because we notice a big increase on Fridays when they come to pick it up. I thought, whoa, okay. So I don't know, maybe you could look into it.
I will. We will look into it. So the last item on this slide is the projected contribution to special education, and that's a range anywhere from $6.4 million to $6.7 million in this fiscal year. So this slide shows our 2021 multi-year projection at a 0% COLA. So I'll just point out the yellow row, which is our projected ending fund balance. So for this current fiscal year, 2021, we project about a $4.58 million ending fund balance. Our reserve for economic uncertainties, the required reserve is $1,736,253, and we have met the requirement, which is the orange row. For next fiscal year, so this is a positive budget this year. 21-22, we project our ending fund balance at $2.4 million, and we are meeting the reserve. What's built into this current fiscal year are the CARES Act and ESSER funds. So we revert back, we return the cost in 21-22, since those funds are one time. But then in 22-23, we project a negative ending fund balance of $3.3 million, and we do not meet the reserve. So this is a negative budget. So we project our budget reduction needs in 21-22 at $5.2 million, which is a 0% COLA. So if we were to file our first interim, we would have a negative budget certification at first interim, based on this slide. So at a negative 4% COLA, the numbers have changed. So in the yellow row, we have for this year, these numbers haven't changed for this fiscal year. And then in 21-22, our projected ending fund balance, the yellow row, decreased to $624,000, and we are not meeting our reserve. Our reserve requirements $1.7 million. And then in 22-23, projected ending fund balance of $5.2 million. a negative $5.2 million. So overall, this multi-year projection shows a negative budget certification and a budget reduction plan needed for fiscal year 21-22 of $7 million, which is a negative 4% COLA.
Marilyn, where did you come up with the negative 4%?
It was a projected COLA. That's been discussed through. So that's the projection that is out there right now.
I see.
Marilyn,
So
Yeah.
you froze a little bit. Would you
Oh.
repeat that one more time?
Oh, it's a projection from different agencies like FICMAT and the county. So that's still up in the air. They're still discussing it at all levels: SSC, FICMAT, the legislative analyst office, and the county. So that's still to be determined.
yeah, so
I
guess my next question would be, other school districts, based off of what you said, are using this as well as their multi-year projection?
It's not, they haven't finalized it. So in our guidance from the county, this is just the scenario that's been built for our district. It's not set in stone. The guidance from the county is to build our first interim on a 0% COLA, but this is the worst case scenario if we don't receive.
The reason I say it seems like an arbitrary number, and I didn't know if it has any validity, at least from what you're hearing.
Yeah, it was a worst case scenario.
So the reason I say that is because if that happens, I can guarantee you that a significant amount of school districts, I'd say the majority, maybe 90%, are probably going to be in the same situation we are. So I guess my question is that why would the county put an arbitrary number like that? Just seems odd to me. But I do believe we should. This is good. I mean, we're presenting the worst case scenario, but the number seems arbitrary.
Right.
Yeah, the ranges.
And just to add, because it's arbitrary, I also think it's highly unlikely. I hope I'm right, actually, but you never know. But I guess we're doing the right thing. But it's arbitrary in my opinion.
Yeah, and the Department of Finance and your legislative analyst's office and the FICMAT type entities, school finance entities, were projecting a potential negative COLA of -3% to -5%. I'm guessing, I think what we chose was to go in the middle of -3 to 5 to build your worst case scenario for you, because that's considered a best practice since we don't know where the COLA is going to land. Yesterday was kind of exciting, and today, because the legislative analysts felt like the revenues came in stronger than they had anticipated for the January to December 2020 fiscal year. Stronger meaning there's a possibility of a COLA that lands closer to a 1% type COLA. So if we reverse back one slide to that 0% COLA scenario, the only thing that's going to get better than this slide would be somewhere between a 1 and a 1.5% COLA is probably what Marilyn and I would soundly tell you. The only problem with that 1 to 1.5% COLA is it only brings you between 500,000 to 750,000 more in revenues. So it still doesn't completely wipe out that third year yellow box of a -3.3 million. But it's a whole lot better than the -4% COLA scenario.
Yeah, and the -3.3, we have to add to that the reserve of 1.76 million, and that gives you the reduction of 5.2 because we're not meeting the reserve. So it's a negative ending fund balance plus the reserve.
That 3% reserve.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, let's get to that next slide, Ms. Merrill. You've got a few more slides and we have another presentation.
Yes. So this is the enrollment, 2021 enrollment as of November 13th. So as you can see, in our actual enrollment in our Synergy, our student information system, is 4,123. And we projected an enrollment without SDC or preschool of 4,198 students. So it's a difference of 75 students, and that's of November 13th. Next slide. This is the projection student enrollment for 21-22. So if we project a decline in enrollment of about 4,004, which is a decline of 100 students without SDC or preschool. And then we have preschools 2021 actual enrollment versus projected enrollment. So actual enrollment came in at 171 students, and projected enrollment was 268 preschool students, which is a decline of 97 students.
And my guess, Marilyn, COVID had a lot to do with this. I mean, that's the bottom line. I mean, that's the, you know.
Yeah, I think about 50% of California school districts are experiencing declining enrollment. And many families are moving out of California because of the cost of living is so high in California. And we have our 21-22 proposed budget reduction plan, which includes the following reductions. Number one is the spending freeze. So we hope to save about $200,000, and that's for anything spending freeze of materials, supplies, contracts, and other expenses. We're looking at allowable cost shifts from unrestricted general fund to restricted funds of about $75,000. Number three is the most difficult one on the budget reduction plan. And this is applying staffing ratios and reducing unfunded programs and positions through layoff resolutions and natural attrition. So that's a savings of approximately $4 million. And then number four is still to be determined. To get us to 5.2 million, we are still looking for reductions in the amount of approximately $900,000. And then the 7 million, we are still looking for reductions in the amount of $2.7 million. And hopefully we will see something of one-time federal stimulus funds soon, which will help address this to be determined category. And this is our 21-22 proposed budget timeline, development timeline, which we will begin now, which starts today and continues throughout the months. So in December, we'll take our 2021 first interim budget report and our 21-22 budget reduction plan. And then January, we have our governor's state proposed budget. And we will also have our board workshop in January or February, and our 21-22 projected enrollment and staffing. February will begin our possible layoff resolutions, starting with certificated layoff resolution. And we hope to bring to the board our 1920 audit report. And then in March, we have a couple possible layoff resolutions for classified and certificated staff. And we will also bring our 2021 second interim budget report. And then in April, additional layoff resolutions for classified part 2 and a final layoff resolution for certificated staff. And then in May, we have our LCAP annual review, and then our governor's May revised state budget. In June, we have our public hearings for 21-22 proposed budget and proposed LCAP, and the adoption of our 21-22 budget. And then in July, we have our 21-22 adopted budget due to the County Office of Ed. We are also asking for board guidance or any guidance or concerns that you have at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Adrianson, for the very detailed presentation. I'm going to go again through our list or board members. Ms. Palasiga.
Not for me at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Palasiga. Ms. Irene Lopez.
Gee, too bad the Coca-Cola company couldn't give us a cola, a good one, but can't do it. So I know it's a lot of work, what you've done for the presentation, and you've had to go by guidelines. I know that too. I always have that question when the county gives us some type of information or writes us a letter. And I want to thank you, Dr. Potter, for answering that letter that I read, where you stipulated everything that we've gone through, have been doing to coincide with what we've been able to actually do these 2 years. I think they needed to open their eyes and their mind and see that. And I want to thank you for that, for you and Marilyn that have worked so hard for it to let them. But you see, at the same time, I think, well, wait a minute. You guys are the county office. We're just a district. But I think that we let them know we shine and we'll continue. So I know there's a lot of things here in the reduction that kind of scares us for the 21, 22, but hopefully we'll need to recover. And I know it scares everybody, but we just need help, and we need to have it from all sources that we can receive it. And I hope our legislatures will be able to function the way, not like Trump, but this new way, and seeing all the schools, how education is really being impacted by all this. And hopefully we'll be able to get back on that road and get rid of this epidemic to bring us, you know, success in the future, because it's very important for all of us. Life is very precious, and I don't think a lot of people understand that. And you have to respect life in order to save life. So I hope that we will continue to see that and fight for it, and really together, as all of us are in this, you know, working. But thank you for all the work you do. And this is good information, because I do question some things, but you know what? I'm not good at numbers, but I know that you do a lot of work on this, and I want to appreciate your staff too. Thank you for everything that you do to bring this presentation to us, which is very important for us to understand. And I'm keeping it.
Thank you.
In my folder. Okay.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Lopez.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. Mr. Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. President. My guidance is simple. Get us 3 consecutive years of positive budget in the CBO.
Okay.
That's all.
Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, no, my guidance is actually a little bit more, well, perhaps more difficult. My request is to keep our staff intact as much as possible. And what I mean by that, and whenever I face a dilemma, I'm always mindful of things I can control and the things I can't. If you don't mind, Marilyn, can you go back to the slide where you're identifying, I guess, our projections and I guess losses?
Is it the multi-year?
No,
The
it's the
budget
one where
reduction?
you, yeah, no, I think it's the one before that.
More?
Yes.
Is it the budget reduction plan?
It's the one, oh, that one, this one right here, the top financial issues.
Oh, the top financial. Oh, it's the next one.
So
this one.
Yeah. Yeah. So these are the things that I think we need to be focusing on, but we should be mindful of the things, again, that we can control and the things we can't. So what are the things that we can control?
Okay.
The projected contribution to the cafeteria fund, special education, perhaps not, because these are usually set. And that's something we just need to have. Right. But the things that we can control, for example, even though they involve other.
Uh-oh.
Mr. Martinez.
I think we lost Mr. Martinez for a second.
Uh-oh.
let's wait a couple of seconds, see if he comes back. And we can circle back around. Mr. Martinez, go ahead. You cut off about 30 seconds ago or 40 seconds ago. No, he's still.
Oh no.
All right. I guess I'll share my couple of thoughts. I'll be brief.
Okay.
First off, want to thank you for the presentation, Ms. Adrianson. Always very detailed. I do want to say it's always very frustrating when we come back to these presentations because it feels like we're always swimming against the current. And I think we're in a very similar situation to where we were just a few months ago, just waiting for the state budget to come and to figure things out. And I appreciate that we're preparing for the worst, but we should be hoping for the best. And I think I know it's best practice, and we need to do it. But also, I'm still hopeful that things will turn around a little bit once January comes. But I'll be very brief and also say just I think we need to somehow figure out, obviously without impacting the families and the people in our district, but we're going to eventually need to fix this and correct this because we're always behind. And I appreciate all the work that you, Dr. Potter, and everybody has been doing for the past 2 years, because we're way better than where we were obviously 2 years ago. But I think obviously there's still a lot of work to do, and I trust that you will continue to work even double hard, because it's just really difficult to see the numbers, and we can't get ahead of the 8 ball, as they said. We're always behind the 8 ball. So it'll be great once we're able to accomplish that. I know we have the team to do it, and obviously there's going to be difficult decisions, but let's try to work on multiple areas and multiple ways to make sure that we can bring this budget to a little bit to better situation.
Okay.
But anyway, let's keep doing what you're doing.
President Gormilan, I'm here. I'm back.
Okay. So just to finish off before I circle back to Mr. Martinez, is thank you so much for all the work that you're doing. I know you work extra. You work sometimes weekends. But please keep it up. I'm going to ask you to keep it up. We need to make sure that we get ahead of this budget, because ultimately it's going to eventually impact the students, which is what we don't want.
Right.
Mr. Martinez.
Yeah. So Marilyn, sorry for that. I guess my point that I was making is, when you look at the top financial issues, I know that last year we did advocacy when it came to reaching out to our state and federal legislators.
Right.
I think we should do that again. Obviously, when it comes to the cash deferrals and the COLA, those are the top priorities when it comes to reaching out to the state legislators, but also the federal legislators, and obviously advocating for the next stimulus package. So I think those are things we can control and we should be focusing on. And I know I've been mentioning this before, but when it comes to the decline in enrollment, I just don't want us to sit idly by and let this continue to go down every single year. I want us to think creatively, and I know that we're limited because of COVID, how we can actually deal with decline in enrollment. But I would really like us to address this head on, particularly how we can think creatively on how we can improve this. If we're destined to lose 100 students, let's try to shoot for not losing 50 of those students. So those are the things I think that we have control of, and if anything, that's the direction that I give, and the guidance is that focus on the things that we can do, and let's try to fix these issues as much as possible.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. I think we will begin some type of declining enrollment task force. So we'll speak about it in cabinet and decide how to roll that out.
Ms. Adrianson, I just have one more question. When will it be our next opportunity, or when can we revisit again? Will it be until January when the state budget starts, information starts coming, or
I'll bring to the board the first interim report next month. So we'll see more numbers there. And then in January, that's the first look at the governor's proposed 21-22 budget. So that'll be our first chance to look at it. And I will do a presentation to the board in January.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other final comments from the board or anybody? Thank you, Ms. Adrianson, for that
Thank you.
great, thorough presentation and for all the work.
Thank you.
So we're moving on from 6.1D to 6.1E, school reopening, COVID safety update. Director of Maintenance, Operations, Transportation Facilities, Mr. Paulo Acevedo. Mr. Acevedo.
Good
There
evening,
you are.
board and cabinet. Hopefully, we go through this fast here for you guys. All right, so we're going to be reviewing the reopening of schools to keep the children safe and the staff safe on site. Next slide. So during this presentation, we're going to talk about signage, health and safety, classroom setup, and disinfection. Next slide. Signage. Next slide there. All right, so we've been working hard on designing and installing directional signage on most of our campuses. As you can see here, pictured how we're trying to do the 6 foot social distancing. So the students are standing in line and getting ready to enter the campuses. Both you see, example here is the middle school in La Mirada. And you'll notice here, this example here is Sunset, and how we're trying to keep the directional traffic going one way and the students kind of not crossing each other. That's why you see the do not enter. You'll notice a lot of our campuses will have a lot of the signage already on the ground, and we're gonna be alternate after the ACEs and YMCA program that Omar is working on. We will alter it one more time to make sure it fits our needs when we get ready to open campuses. Next slide.
On the signage and the stickers on the ground and also these signs, I just want to make sure we thank Mr. Azevedo. He personally designed all the signage for our district, and that signage is now being used as a model statewide. So thank you, Mr. Azevedo.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
That's awesome.
So this slide here is showing that you'll notice, I'll go around the slide. Over here is the elementary school wash your hands. We have posted that in all classrooms in all elementary classrooms in Spanish and English. The one behind is the CDC guidelines that we put in all of the middle schools. Throughout all the campuses, we do have how to wear your mask properly in both English and Spanish. Almost all signs that we have installed are both bilingual. And then at the front of all offices, we do have the coronavirus alert signage and the limited entry to the facility. On the outside of the campuses, we're going to be putting up this we can call it the A-frame sign or the sandwich board sign on what is COVID, and telling people, if you have any of these symptoms, please do not come to the campus. Please turn around and take your child home on there before they even come across any other children. Next slide. All right, health and safety. Next slide, sir. All right, so as the children enter, we have the safety check here system that Dr. Farkas spoke about, that we're currently using for the YMCA program, where the kids will be coming in. They'll scan their wrists or scan their foreheads, and it will take their temperature. If the temperature hits over 100 degrees, the panel up top will alarm, letting them know, hey, you know what, the student should not come into the facility. And from there, there'll be a secondary place for the student to be re-screened after they cool off for 5 minutes. And if they fail to screen again, that's when we take them to a controlled space where the child will be, held there until the parents come pick them up. If you look at this iPad that you see here, this is for all faculty and staff when they arrive on site, where they can also scan themselves coming in. And if they hit over 100 degrees, this also alarms red. The whole thing turns red. Let them know they can't come in, and they have to turn on and go home. And if you notice here also, if you're not wearing a mask, it will also alarm. So we went to that programming too. So no mask will alarm, high temperature will alarm. Next slide. All right, in all classrooms, we are installing this, they call it the GPS unit. So this unit here will help improve the air, the air in the classroom, and both, it will also disinfect the air and disinfect all surfaces, but it will not replace daily disinfecting or the social distancing. But this unit will help reduce particulate matters, air pollution, mold spores, and viruses such as COVID-19. On tests that they've done within 10 minutes, COVID-19 was reduced or eliminated by 84%, in 15 by 92%, and in 30 minutes, 99.4%. Next slide. In all portable classrooms, we're going to be installing this HEPA filter air scrubbers to also, I guess, provide better air for the students and for the faculty on site and reduce the risk of COVID-19. Next slide. All right, hand washing. This is going to be mainly the San Ysidro Middle School. There's some locations over at OVH and there's one more campus off the top of my head. I'm sorry, Sunset. The sinks are behind the teacher. So the students don't have to go behind the teacher to wash their hands because we're trying to keep that distance away. We're going to be putting these out in the hallways. So the children go out there and wash their hands every day in between classes and when they get to school. And this will be maintained by the custodial staff. Next slide. And at all sinks, we've installed, we made sure that they have hand soap and hand towels. And in every classroom, when you enter a classroom, there is a hand sanitizing station available. Next slide. All right, the world of plexiglass. Next slide, please. All right, so we've been setting up the classrooms. We're really pushing hard on getting that 12 to 14 students per cohort. So you can see by the A and B stickers there. We're almost, we're right at the tipping point. I want to say we're about 96, 97% done of all the plexiglass shields. But this is where we're at right now. Almost every school's been completed with the plexiglass, but we're going through to add that additional count in every classroom. So that's why I bring that down to 95%. As you can see on the ground, we did 6-foot squares. The children will be 6 feet away from each other by cohort, and everybody will have the plexiglass shield. From the front shield that you see here in this picture to the whiteboard is 6 foot. So the teacher does have a 6-foot space to work in. Next slide. And all offices, all desks will have, does have the plexiglass here installed that you see here. Next slide. All right, disinfection. All right, one more slide, sir. All right, so every day we're either going to be using the Perel Professional Surface Disinfectant or the Waxy 710 HP. The Perel provides about a 30-second kill time, where the Waxy 710 HP will do about a 5-minute kill time on there. And if we do have an outbreak at any of our classrooms or office spaces or location, we're using the Clorox Total 360 system to help disinfect the area. Next slide. Board guidance, any questions?
That Clorox system in your previous slide, that's non-chlorine.
Correct.
Clorox, correct?
That's why I'm using this over the Pure Tab. We also have Pure Tab backpacks. That's more of a chlorine bleach based, where this is not. Because
I know that chlorine, when inhaled, can be dangerous for kids, for people too.
Oh yeah, I've been in those rooms. Yes, and that's why we switched to the Clorox 360.
Thank you. That's
You're welcome.
Ms. Irene?
Well, Mr. Acevedo, you should have charged the state for the drawings that you did. They would give us some money for that. But anyway, you did a fabulous job, and I got to see it in person. We walked around and saw the schools with it, and I just couldn't believe the plexiglass that it was on in the classrooms. That's really terrific and nice, and I think it's good to have someone that had that ability to do all this and to work on it so hard. And I love when you walk up to the school, they're all over the signs, either way that you may want to get in, but there the most important thing is there that they need to know in both languages. So I want to commend you on that, and your staff also, all the work that you've done, and I hope to God that we'll be able to open up in next year with the same purpose of being safe as always, and take care of our community and our kids, most important. So thank you for all the good ideas that you've brought in, talent that you brought with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lopez. Mr. Lopez?
No guidance from me. Just thank you very much for having us ready to go.
Thank you, Mr. Lopez. Mr. Martinez?
I want to piggyback off Irene. I think that if we would have charged the state, maybe that would have helped close the funding gap that we have. No, on all serious though, I think Mr. Acevedo, you've done a great job. We've gone on, a personal tours of the schools, and frankly, I've been impressed, still impressed. So just keep up the good work, and thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Acevedo, thank you so much as well for all the work that you've done in your team and everybody. The GPS units, are those, would we be able just to keep those forever? Because I think it's great to have something that purifies the air within the classrooms, even after COVID. You know how students will, catch something and then everybody has it. I don't know, maybe it's something to look for if it's not expensive, but those are great. Looks like they're a great addition to our schools.
The lifespan of those units will be anywhere from 10 to 12 years on there. And it'll also reduce costs on our filters. By providing the cleaner air, we won't be able to change our filters out so much. And there's no need to go to a MERV 13. We can stay with a MERV 8 filter and save that expense on trying to move up to another filter.
That is excellent news. So it's great that you're, finding stuff that we can use in the long run. So yeah, thank you for that presentation, Mr. Acevedo. I would totally work for your department later on. So if you're hiring, let me know, because that sounds like fun. You're doing a lot of fun work.
It's a lot of
fun. Then I would move on to Maryland's, but that's a little bit harder. Anyway, no, thank you. I'm joking, but thank you. I would work for any department here at this district. Thank you, Mr. Acevedo. Any other questions, any comments?
I just want to sincerely thank Mr. Azevedo and his entire MOTF team. They've been doing a remarkable job. I mean, even our bus drivers have been cutting plexiglass and helping to install it in our offices and all of our school locations. And I mean, they've just been everywhere throughout our district, and it's been wonderful. I want to thank you also for the tours for the board members and cabinet members of the school, so we could actually see it in person, the classrooms and the setup. And if I haven't told you, we did get a request from Congressman Juan Vargas to have you tour him as well.
Awesome.
To see our school COVID safety setup in the schools and the classrooms. There's a lot of interest in making sure we're doing it right and to find good samples. So I think the setups that your team has done in our schools that you've envisioned in your mind for us is very much being considered a role model statewide. So thank you very much.
We are leading the way in the state of California.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I think that concludes the presentations. That is correct. And that moves us on to item number 7, which is our governing board recess to closed session in accordance with section 54954.5 regarding government code, section 54957, public employee discipline, dismissal, release, and reassignment, 7.2, which is government code section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. And then I think that will cover our closed session. So I'll entertain a motion to recess into closed session.
So moved.
A second.
Mr. Martinez moves and Ms. Palasiga seconds. Dr. Potter, could you help us with a roll call vote to move into closed session?
Calling for the roll call vote for closed session, beginning with board member Mrs. Rosalia Palasiga,
Yes.
board member Irene Lopez,
Yes.
board clerk Rudy Lopez,
Aye.
board vice president Antonio Martinez,
Yes.
and board president Mr. Bermilan.
Yes.
Mr. President, the vote passes 5-0. And I would wonder, would we be able to do a 5-minute kind of transition to closed session to take a mini break?
Yes, let's take a mini break. And if you're following this meeting through the stream, we're going to recess into closed session and we'll be back, but we'll just be back to adjourn and to report out. So the open session, the open portion of this meeting has concluded, except for the adjournment. So let's take a 5-minute break. So that's 7:45. We'll see you guys there. So I don't need to give you time. So. Oh, come on. Do we have everybody here already? Let me see. We're missing Miss Irene. So we're just waiting for Miss Irene so we can adjourn.
If I don't get a chance, I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving and a safe one too.
Likewise, Dr. Potter. Miss Irene, welcome. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 board members. So if it's okay with you, I will now again reconvene into, and we're streaming, right? We're streaming this, Mr. Lewis?
Yes, we're still streaming.
Okay, thank you. So I'll just reconvene into open session. There's nothing to report out from closed session. And I will now move us on to item number 8, which is adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn our meeting?
So
Make
moved.
a motion.
Mr. Martinez.
Second.
Mr. Martinez moves and Ms. Irene seconds it. Dr. Potter, will you help us please with a vote?
Calling for a roll call vote to adjourn the meeting, which is agenda item number 8, beginning with board member Mrs. Rosalia Palasigue
Yes.
and board member Mrs. Irene Lopez
Yes.
and board clerk Mr. Rudy Lopez
Aye.
and board vice president Mr. Antonio Martinez
Yes.
and board president Mr. Humberto Gurmilan.
Yes.
Mr. President, you have a 5-0 vote to adjourn the meeting. I don't have the time in front of me.
We're adjourning at 8:59.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Potter. So officially our meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody that helped us put this meeting together. And thank you, everybody, for attending. And ahora sí, have a good Thanksgiving. Be safe. Please be safe. Stay safe, and we'll see you in December. Thank you, everybody.
Right. Happy Thanksgiving, everybody.
Happy